So you know that words have synonyms, but do idioms have synonyms?
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to WaiGuo Friends English. We have talked a lot about learning synonyms as a way to broaden and deepen your vocabulary because it's a really good strategy. There's more out there than just the beginner words that you learned a long time ago. And the same is true of idioms. Once you start getting these advanced vocabulary down, it's a really good idea as soon as possible start picking up these idioms so that make your language more colorful.
Idioms are set phrases that we use to express something. We almost always say them the same way or very similar to the same pattern, but they have this image. But taken literally, they don't make any sense. So, for example, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
It's like the pot calling the kettle black.
It's raining cats and dogs.
There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Idioms are a fantastic way to sound more fluent, so learning them is crucial.
However, it is easy to use them in the wrong way or just too often. A lot of non-native speakers, when they start getting into idioms, it's a very colorful, interesting, unique, fun way to learn a language, but either they use them in the wrong context or they just use them so often and it just still sounds so unnatural.
Yeah, actually, one of the ways that we can tell the difference between a very fluent non-native speaker and a native speaker is that the non-native speakers tend to use idioms way too much. Even if they use them accurately, they tend to use them way too much. You can find some native speakers who do the same, of course, you can find that, but it's not as common.
So then the question becomes, if you shouldn't use them wrongly and you shouldn't use them too much, but you shouldn't use them too little, how are you going to figure this all out? Well, the trick is to actually learn synonyms to these idioms to kind of help you out so you're not always saying, it's raining cats and dogs out there. Idioms are powerful because what they are word pictures. A lot of times people, when they're speaking a language, they're thinking in terms of images, of pictures around them. So when they say, I'm hungry, they're thinking of an image of bread or an image of a person holding their stomach or something like that. They're thinking word pictures and they express that in language. So what idioms do is they pick up on this, use these as word pictures, and then color the language that's being spoken.
Even if it doesn't really seem fitting in the context. Sometimes an idiom like, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, that's a very strong image. It's a very strange image to have as well. But it's one of those things. There's a whole story behind it. There's a whole history behind that. And the reason we use it is because it has such that strong image. It's kind of like imagery for drawing a line between two different things. So don't throw something precious out with things that you're going to throw out. That's the gist of that idiom. Well, we can use that in so many other applications as well, which is why you're going to see something about babies and bathwater being used in something like data collection. It's strange. It's very strange, but it's something that helps you get into the understanding of the culture. That's why learning culture along with language is so important. If you're reaching for fluency, you've got to have some understanding what people are thinking and when people will make that bridge and connection and when they won't.
The hard question that you actually have to figure out, and as almost like a detective, is why would one person use one idiom over another, especially if they have overlapping meanings? That is largely what differentiates a near fluent speaker and a native speaker of a language. They understand and they can hash that out to say like, yeah, I could say that. I could say idiom A, but actually in this context, I'm going to choose idiom B just because it feels right.
It produces an effect.
So what you need to decide now is, why would you want to choose one idiom over another? Why would you want to choose one picture over another?
Right, and if you get into anything with mass communication or with trying to write eloquently to massive English-speaking audiences, okay, you've got to be able to step into their shoes. You've got to be able to understand how they are going to take that image and how they're going to understand that image. And you'll want to choose and craft the image or the idiom that you want to use to convey a certain meaning, to produce a certain effect. But right now, while you're aiming for fluency, your goal is just to be able to express yourself. So for you, it's going to be taking the images that make sense to you and putting those into English comfortably.
Another big question that we get a lot is, how do you learn these synonyms? If we have this idiom that some people see as like a set phrase, a puzzle piece, a block that cannot be separated from its parts, That's a really bad way to think about an idiom. An idiom is, as we've already said, is a word picture. So what you need to find are other pictures that are similar to that picture. The way you can use this is you can use some kind of vocabulary organizer, that, like the one that we have talked about on our YouTube channel, that we call the Advanced Vocabulary Study Guide, which you can find in this video right here. Basically, it comes down to find a natural, non-scripted context for you to kind of pick up on these idioms and other synonyms that you can use for that. Podcast, movie, impromptu speeches, things like that.
Then you need to write that idiom down and look up any synonyms for that idiom, whether it's vocabulary synonyms or idiom synonyms. Ideally, you'll write down the words first, then you'll go find and hunt down those idiom synonyms. You can do this by asking a native speaker what this idiom means and what other idioms they could use in certain contexts and why they would choose one over the other while you're at it. The main question you want to ask at this point when you're talking to a native speaker is, why would I use this one over this one? If these two are synonyms, or they're essentially synonyms, why would I use one over the other? And see what they say. Now, everybody's going to have a different reason here. Some people might not even have an answer because it comes to them by context. It comes to them by the image in their head that pops up in the context of speaking. Not necessarily from a teacher standpoint. Not everybody's going to be able to teach you exactly why you would use one over the other because they haven't thought about it. But getting this information while you're learning and taking those notes is really going to help you make those things stick.
I would also say, along with that, when you are collecting these different synonyms, pay attention to two native speakers interacting, because if I'm like, man, it's raining cats and dogs out here, Amber's likely not to say, it is raining cats and dogs out here. Wow, that would be redundant and useless. And so she could say, instead, she could say, man, you're right, it is raining buckets out here. And then all of a sudden, you just found a different idiom that means similar because she's saying the same thing. She's giving validation, confirmation. She thinks it's raining a lot as well, by saying it's raining buckets instead of it's raining cats and dogs.
Then you need to write or speak and record using this idiom and its synonyms. You've got to. It's not enough to just study something. You've got to actually use it. You've got to produce it to finish that circle, to make things come full circle and just really settle into your mind. And you've got to do it a lot. You've got to do it more than a few times, especially within that first week. But after a month, I would say you should go back to the beginning, to week 1, and start reviewing those again, because you need to have some kind of spaced repetition. Now, ideally, if you live in an English-speaking culture and you work in an English-speaking environment, you're going to get that already. You're going to have that built into your experience. But that's not always the case. And what happens if you spend so much time in that context, you're not exposed to other contexts, so you're just surprised every time you go to the grocery store because you hear something new, when everything at work makes sense and you know those idioms and can use them well. Different contexts have different idioms that we like to use. So it's important to be able to expose yourself and use different idioms in different contexts.
So here are 5 examples of some popular idioms that we have, their meanings, and some of the synonyms that we have found.
Just as an example to help you get started.
So for example, the first one is to thumb one's nose at someone. So I thumb my nose at you, or I thumb my nose at this situation.
It does not mean thumbs up. It's kind of more like a, well, it's not even this.
It's a Victorian middle finger. That's what it is. What it means is to show no respect for someone or something. So it just means I don't care at all about your position or status or whatever. I disrespect you.
Basically. You can use other idioms for this. You could say set one's face against. Now this one is based off of disrespect for somebody. They've lost your respect, to set your face against, but it also means you're going to be coming against them. Which, to thumb your nose at somebody can be just as simple as ignoring them, regardless of their status, regardless of the fact that they're a human being. That you can thumb your nose at somebody by ignoring them. But when you set your face against them, like, you're ignoring them and their position, but you're also doing it intentionally to insult them, and you're going to come against them in other ways.
Another face one is fly in the face of.
This idiom is synonymous to thumb his nose at, because to fly in the face of is, it's kind of like to slap somebody in the face. It's very rude. To fly in the face of somebody means you are sending a message and right to their face, and it is rude.
The next one is a baseball idiom, which is to knock it out of the park.
You've probably heard this one.
It means to succeed tremendously. Like baseball, if you know anything about it, if you get a home run, if you make the ball go over the back fence, everyone gets to run around the bases, but it's incredibly difficult. And so if you do, great job.
Idiom synonyms here would be like, I nailed it. Like, he knocked it out of the park. He nailed it. Okay, to nail it means I mean, in my mind, the picture that I have in my mind is basically somebody taking a hammer and a nail and they get it in one shot.
Oh, yeah.
It's like super satisfying, okay? So they succeed tremendously. They nail it right on the head. They get the spot.
Like, I nailed that interview.
But another idiom synonym here would be hit the jackpot. And this would mean, like, kind of has a luck idea to it, random chance kind of idea, but to hit the jackpot means you succeed tremendously. Like, you win, basically.
Another one, which I actually secretly love, is called to beat around the bush, which means to discuss things in more of a roundabout, indirect way instead of speaking directly at the situation at hand.
Yes, and which synonym you use really depends on what the motivation for doing that is. For example, if you're doing it because you don't want to make a decision, you just don't want to commit to something, you could say sit on the fence.
Ooh.
To beat around the bush, you know, he's talking and talking and talking and not really getting to the point because he really doesn't want to have to make the decision. That's sitting on the fence.
Two that are kind of similar are to dodge the issue or to fudge the issue. Fudge in this case meaning kind of like smudging or smearing, just like making it gray. So instead of it having a clean line, the person is either sidestepping the issue or specifically intentionally blurring the issue so it's hard to make a decision anyway.
Yeah, and they could be using flattery. They could be just talking about lots of different things that are kind of related, but not really directly the thing. Yeah, this is beating around the bush as well. You also have to mince one's words. Now, mincing is that action in cooking where you make really small cuts and you chop, 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 and you make minced pieces. It doesn't even have to be like garlic or something. Well, to mince one's words is to use a lot of words, just a lot, and you cut them up, and it's kind of like this disorganized pile. There's not a linear fashion, and it's not going to any particular goal. This is beating around the bush as well, but we can also say to mince one's words.
If you've already picked up on it, all of these are often used in the negative. Don't beat around the bush. Don't mince one's words. Let's not mince words here and talk directly to it.
Yeah, we prefer talking directly in that case, although a lot of people learning American small talk feel like we beat around the bush quite a bit.
Number 4 is bite the bullet.
It's a good American idiom.
Again, the idioms make no sense when you try to think about them literally. If you use them in a sentence and you just take the words themselves, not the images which they represent, then you would be completely shocked about, like, what in the world? Why did we talk about this? Bite the bullet means to do something difficult that you've been putting off or delaying because of some sort of reason.
Or it's just unpleasant. Maybe you're just avoiding it because it's unpleasant and you know it's going to be, so you're procrastinating. Okay, so to bite the bullet is to finally pick yourself up and do it.
Just gotta get it done.
So idioms here could be something like jump in with both feet, which can have a positive meaning but also a negative meaning. Okay, so to just jump into it. This has an idea of like blissful unawareness of how difficult it could be. You're just doing it. You're just diving in. And so that one, it's a loose synonym, probably.
One idiom that actually our kids recently discovered was pay the piper. Pay the piper comes from a story. I'm not going to tell the story, but basically it comes down to whether or not you're actually going to fulfill the things that you were going to do. In the story, it's a physical payment of a person who did something. So a lot of times we bite the bullet, and a lot of times that has a financial nuance to say, like, I have to put money down or else I'm not going to commit. Here's my money.
I've got to buy those new tires, even though it's going to put me out $1,000.
Yeah.
Just got to bite the bullet and do it. Leave a crossroads is a synonym here, but to leave a crossroads means basically you have had this decision to make. You're at this, you can choose multiple directions. You've been sitting there, you've been kind of procrastinating making a decision because either all the decisions are equal, or that's too difficult to make the decision, or none of them are great choices. But to finally leave the crossroads is to finally make that decision and leave that decision behind you.
A really good one, which is also pretty classic, is to face the music. So sometimes when you are hesitating on those crossroads, you don't want to make the decision, it's unpleasant, or you don't want to commit financially to something, sooner or later you have to face the music. You have to actually come to grips with the consequence and make that decision. Leave the indecisiveness behind and face the music. In this case, a lot of times it comes down to a consequence that was coming a long time.
Yeah, a consequence you knew was going to come, and you've just been putting it off until you finally have to do it.
The last one we're going to talk about today is add insult to injury.
This one doesn't seem very logical.
But you understand that if a person's already being injured, and then you're insulting them already while they're injured, it's pretty brutal. So that's what it means.
It's an already bad situation that you're making worse. So idioms here could be to rub salt in the wound. which would be awful if you think about it. I don't know if you've ever gotten like vinegar or salt in an open wound. But yeah, not lovely at all. So you're already hurt. Somebody just takes salt and just like creams it in there. But it's a great idiom. It is a synonymous idiom here.
Another one is fan the flames. So if it's not already hot, let's make it more hot and more unpleasant. Let's fan the flames.
We use this a lot with debates and arguments. So something that started as a little argument, it got a little bit more unpleasant, a little bit more heated. And then somebody comes in and it's just like, oh yeah, we're just going to make this argument even worse. Yeah, devil's advocates for the win there. That's adding insult to injury.
Along with that is adding fuel to the fire. Same thing, you already have a fire and then you pour gasoline on the fire. Wow, explosive.
Yeah. Yet another idiomatic synonym here would be to slap somebody in the face.
Oof. This goes way back to the idea of a duel, right? So you get somebody and say, I want to duel you. And so you slap them in the face with a glove or something like that. And it's fight time now. Before it was an argument. Now it's a fight. The last and most gruesome image that you could probably use for this adding insult to injury is twist the knife. So it's not just enough to just stab a person with a knife, but if you twist the knife, you're making it so much worse.
Yeah, so there you go. You can see that there are some very strong pictures for some of these idioms, but they're used on purpose. They're used for an effect. They produce this, I mean, you saw our faces. We're already grimacing at some of these pictures, but we do use them. These are examples of idioms that we use sometimes on a daily basis, so.
For you guys, I know that a lot of you are probably wondering on where you can find a lot of these idioms. You can find a lot of lists online, but the best place that we highly recommend is to actually listen to real people having a conversation. Because sometimes you take an idiom that's so far removed that's on this list of idioms and you try to pull it out and everybody's confused. So make sure that you're trying to incorporate natural spoken idioms by watching regular natural content.
And you can memorize lists of idioms. You can memorize vocabulary. But if you're talking about reaching fluency, you can't memorize a language. Like, yes, you can memorize the definitions, but when you're speaking fluently, you're not thinking about definitions of words. You're thinking about pictures. And you're thinking about images. You're thinking about feelings associated with these terms. You've got to be learning these things by context, not by memorization. Work with your mind, not against it.
Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to learn some more ways to upgrade your vocabulary, we actually have several videos on this channel, like this one, where we talk about better ways to say beginner vocabulary or just ways to upgrade your vocabulary.
Yes. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.